Okay, good morning everybody, good afternoon for those of you in the APAC region. My name is Chris Harvey, I'm the Operations Director at IMS-CAD Global. You're joining us today to one in our series of short webinars. We conduct these every couple of weeks. Many of you will have been on them before, but every couple of weeks do a new webinar on different areas of virtualization and cloud computing. Just different details and different technical updates and things like that. Today's webinar is utilising private clouds for secure collaboration. And I'm just going to, a little bit of housekeeping. We've got the your GoToWebinar that we're all linked on today, a Citrix product. Down on the bottom right-hand side of your pane, you'll see a questions box. If you have any questions, please pop them in there while we're going. What we normally do to keep these webinars fairly brief, we try and keep everything down to just a brief half hour, is we take most of the questions offline afterwards. I will deal with any if they're particularly relevant or we get a chance and the timing's good. Otherwise, we'll come back to you offline. All of these webinars we do are recorded. You can catch up with all of the recordings through our website. They're on our YouTube channel, so if ever you miss anything or we want to catch up on the other webinars we've done, they're all there for you. But today, utilising private clouds for secure collaboration. So we're going to talk about how and why virtualization or cloud computing is the ideal platform for collaboration, specifically relating to private clouds. I'm going to give you an introduction to IMS-CAD. We're going to talk about clouds, the different types of clouds. Equally, we're going to talk about collaboration and why it's now so important, the emergence and importance of BIM, obviously. And the impact of collaboration on IT, the demands it puts on IT. We also are going to give you a brief overview of how IT responds to these demands in a traditional workstation deployment. And then we're going to look at how virtualization and specifically private clouds really overcome those demands and help IT deliver the security that the business and they need. And as I say, if we get any time, we'll have a quick Q&A at the end, but as I say, questions box is down there on the right. By all means, pop in there any questions as we're ongoing, and I'll deal with them as we go. So, firstly, let's have a quick look. IMS-CAD, who are we? Why are you listening to us today? Well, we're virtualization specialists. We're based in London. We have two data centers in London, two in New York, one in Zurich. We really started our history of virtualization of CAD products being introduced to this by Autodesk because of our virtualization skills. So we were brought in to help them with the first of their products, which was Map 3D, ready for the virtual platforms, and they needed us to help with the deployment of this product in virtual environments. So it became fairly clear to us that obviously just having a single product in this space wasn't really what customers were looking for. So we worked closely with Autodesk and ran some pilots on the AutoCAD and Revit ranges of products, really to see how they would perform and what needed to be done, what tweaks and changes we could do to those products to get them to perform in a virtual environment. So that's really where we started. The movement from there, from us being an Autodesk reseller, well, after we'd run the pilots with Autodesk on the AutoCAD and Revit product ranges, we basically got those released as Citrix ready, at which point we decided that our position was best suited to supplying a support role for Autodesk, for their channel partners, their end users, basically anybody who wanted to virtualize CAD products. We realized there was a real space, a sort of a niche market, a missing piece of skills and expertise that just weren't there in the marketplace. We had the software vendors, Autodesk specifically, who have great knowledge of their applications. Their resellers equally have great knowledge of their applications. And then we have the virtualization companies, of which we were one, who have great knowledge of the virtualization platforms. But nobody really sat in that bit in the middle to make those applications. And we're talking here about the resource-hungry applications, not about office-based applications, which generally will work straight out the box, put onto the Citrix environment and work quite happily. With the CAD applications, the real resource-hungry ones that require heavy-duty graphical computation and output, they really don't perform very well. So it was this specialist area that we decided to align ourselves with. So that followed the Citrix Ready position from Autodesk, the 2012 releases coming out. And from there, we've moved forward and we've continued working with Autodesk. Most recently, we've assisted them with the Citrix certification of the suites. We now see more of the suites being supported and ready for the Citrix platform, and changes in licensing mean all sorts of different things with Autodesk now. On top of that, after the suites, well, we move into additional testing, and I can tell you that we do testing for Citrix on their products. We do testing for NVIDIA. We've assisted them with their latest grid technology products, looking at scalability of Revit, of Inventor, with various Autodesk applications with that product. We work very closely with HP, and we've done testing with Dell on some of their servers to make sure they're suitable for these environments. And on top of that, we do all sorts of other third-party applications, add-ons and plugins. Obviously, what we found is in any of these deployments, people have a range of applications and tools that they use, not specifically from one single vendor, but from a mix of different vendors. And really the key thing was to get all of these products performing in this virtual space so that they really could move their whole work environment into a cloud-based or virtual deployment, as opposed to having a mix of desktop and cloud-based services. So that's really where we fit in as IMS CAD. Now, we have deployed and support more CAD users on virtual platforms than anybody else globally. This really is our specialist area. We spent 5 years doing it. We really are the specialists, the global specialists at doing this, which is why I guess you're tuning in to hear what we've got to say today. So I'm going to move briefly on from IMS CAD. Enough about us. Let's talk about the matters in hand. And what we're talking about is clouds. So let's clarify for you the differences that exist between clouds, because there's a lot of confused information going out into the marketplace from all sorts of areas about what cloud computing actually means. So as we see it, there are three different types of clouds. The personal clouds are all about the individuals. They basically empowering and enabling them to work and collaborate from any location at any time and on any device. So IT does not own the personal clouds. These represent the devices, applications, data, contacts, the locations, all of the stuff that's unique to each individual. The role of IT is to make those unique cloud of assets available anywhere at any time and on any device for those individuals. Now, public clouds at the next level, well, the public clouds sit over the top. They offer organizations additional functionality or service options which are outside their own infrastructure. It provides them with expansion possibilities and expandability as an on-demand service, but this is over and above what they have in their infrastructure. So you'll see this in situations. We can look at the cloud rendering services from Autodesk, mail services from Microsoft like Office 365. These are public cloud offerings which IT can call upon to extend the services they can offer to their individuals. Now, today we're talking about private clouds. Private clouds cover the broad mix of applications, data, the users necessary for an organization to function effectively and securely. So they're critical in allowing IT to centralize and manage applications, desktops, and then deliver them as an on-demand service to any device, but at the same time maintaining the levels of security and control that the business and IT require. Now, that's where the private clouds fit in. They, in effect, are supplying the personal clouds for the users of that organization. They will, of course, link into the public clouds for services like Office 365, but really we're focusing on private clouds. In this case, we generally term deployments hybrid cloud deployments, where they're using all of the different cloud offerings that are available. But in essence, it's the private clouds, the bits that IT has the control over. That's what we're going to focus on today. So, yeah, sorry, I've just covered that. I'm a bit slow on the slides this morning. I've not quite had enough coffee. It's a bit early for me. So private clouds are what we're going to focus on. What I'm now going to mention is the different options. Now, what we're talking about with options here is not options of what clouds, but options of how these are deployed, because there are different options available now, and this is an ever-changing situation. We have done deployments for companies where many times they will host these private clouds themselves. So they have their servers themselves in a server room, and then we'll do the deployments from there. In other situations, those servers can be hosted in a data center, in a co-location environment, as we refer to it, and then the deployment happens from the data center to their users. There's been some changes with Autodesk announcing their term or rental licenses. It opens the doors for different options which are going to move forward. Now, what the licensing changes from Autodesk mean is that organizations can now effectively, let's say we're gearing up for a project for 50 users, an organization can rent licenses for those 50 users for the period of that project. So that might be 6 months or 1 year. So what we're looking at here is basically the developments in private clouds is that we soon will be able to offer hosted solutions, fully hosted solutions to organizations where they can rent the licensing but also rent the infrastructure to support that project deployment. So there's the legal bit to sort out with Autodesk at the moment. It's not completely clear from their license agreement how this is exactly going to sit. We're working with them and speaking with them on getting clarity on that, but unfortunately the legal department are a little bit slow in developing these things. We're still waiting for official confirmation on the exact terms of virtualization under their FY14 license change. So that is coming, but we are in a very real situation going to be able to offer fully hosted infrastructure to take on term licensing in the same way as the software licensing will be done on term basis. So that covers clouds. Let's talk about collaboration, because this is the key to it all and the need. Collaboration is all about, it's allowing the different disciplines to interact, managing the impact of change from one discipline to another. The benefits of cost reduction at all phases are enormous. Everyone works on the same model. We get no surprise impacts of change in one area. It's all managed and immediately visible to other affected areas, trades or disciplines. So traditional building design was largely reliant upon two-dimensional drawings, plans, elevations, sections. BIM, the development of BIM extends this beyond the 3D, the primary spatial dimensions of width, height and depth, bringing in as the fourth dimension time and as the fifth dimension cost. So BIM is a process involving the generation and management of digital representations of both the physical and the functional characteristics of a facility, a building or development. The resulting models become a shared knowledge resource to support decision-making about the facility from the earliest conceptual stages through the design, construction, and the operational life, and even through to the eventual demolition. So BIM enables a single virtual information model to be generated and handed by the design teams, architects, surveyors, civil, structural, MEP, service engineers, etc., handed over to the contractors and then to the subcontractors and then ultimately to the facility owner or operator. So the same model is being used throughout the entire facility or building's life cycle. Each separate profession adds its unique discipline-specific data to the single shared model. So by this, it's reducing the information losses that traditionally occurred when a new team takes ownership of the project, but it also facilitates collaboration between the varying teams working on the project. So ultimately, by doing that, it's managing the impact of change on all the dependent products and equally all the dependent collaborators. So the objects have defined parameters in relations to the other objects within the model. That automatically determines when it's amended what the impact will be on the other dependent objects. So this dramatically affects the impact of any change on all of the collaborators, the other products, their services, and therefore basically the work styles of all of the contributors. So that's in effect how BIM has changed and why we have this massive need for collaboration. The impact of that is, of course, huge amounts of data and a huge demand on IT. It's got to handle vast amounts of data, store that data effectively. We need greater amounts of processing to deal with that data, so we've got more of a draw on the hardware. And equally, when we're talking about collaboration, it's the sheer number of users or collaborators, how best to deploy to them, how best to manage those users, make sure they've got the required applications, the right versions of the applications, and doing all of this across distributed locations with all of these different remote users. So ultimately the outcome, from the security perspective, how does IT control access to the data, version control, how does it keep security and IP protection? The big thing here is, of course, the moment that any data is given to a third party or a collaborator and it leaves the control of IT and the business, it is effectively unsecured data. IT has no way of controlling that data once they give it to a third party. And that really is the biggest downside of collaboration from an IT perspective, is how to maintain the security. And that's our focus here today, is how we can achieve this with private cloud. So let's look at these demands that are placed on IT and how IT responds to those. In a traditional distributed workstation deployment, let's look at how IT deals with those impacts of collaboration. So in terms of the data, the huge amounts of data that need to be processed, we can look at upgrading workstations, higher performance processors to handle the increased processing, upgrading CPUs, upgrading GPUs. All of this, of course, has a capital expenditure. We'll also need to increase, of course, the storage, both centrally in the file shares and equally at the workstations, so the local storage to handle this big data that we're now dealing with. So there's all this impact, a lot of it in terms of IT management, but equally impact in terms of cost of upgrading the processing power, both centrally and at workstation. So we're then got to talk about access, the availability of data. How do they make it available? Well, how does IT deal with this in this distributed model? We're going to have file sharing programs. We're going to have data management tools to control the version of data. We're going to have to improve or upgrade the network to cope with the extra traffic. We might need to bring in WAN optimization tools to improve the network performance. MPLS networks, added size, bandwidth, lease lines for branches, all increased management and all, of course, increased costs. If we look at availability of the applications to collaborators, we've got to make the right applications available, the right versions that are relevant to the collaborator for each different project. So we'll see situations. We did a recent deployment for a company where they had live projects still running on 2010. So we had to deploy Revit to them 2014, Revit 2013, Revit 2012, 2011, and indeed 2010. All of those applications still needed by collaborators working on different projects. So ultimately, in terms of the application, the access to different users, for IT, this all represents increased costs and increased management, which of course has its own cost. And lastly, with all of this distributed data in this workstation environment, how does IT manage? The data is moving now, of course, to the collaborators, so we've got data on hardware controlled by third parties, completely out of the control, outside any level of control of IT. So what does IT do to help manage this? Well, it puts control systems in place, it puts management systems in place, all of the cost, but ultimately the key point is that there is no way that IT in a distributed workstation with data moving to third-party controlled hardware has any real level of control over that data once it's gone. So this is the key danger of collaboration in a distributed workstation deployment, and this is really why we're talking about using clouds, private clouds and virtualization to support collaboration and keep the level of security that they need. So let's look at virtualized deployments. Let's look at the characteristics of virtual deployments of cloud computing. So what are we doing with virtualization? Well, we're centralizing. We're centralizing everything. We're centralizing the processing of all of the data, all of the management of the apps, all of the control of the users. Everything is all basically centrally controlled by IT. From there, it's all then delivered as an on-demand service to any user on any device, again, all controlled by IT. With all of the processing centrally done, the endpoint device becomes of little consequence. So it's not important. Our delivery can be device and operating system independent. Now, in the distributed workstation model, we have all of these different aspects: security, network, users, apps, control, management, everything within each workstation. By centralizing those, all of those component parts are brought centrally from the workstations into the servers, into the data center, and each of those apps and each of those component parts can then be virtualized and dealt with as a single instance and managed as a single instance, as opposed to being managed at each and every workstation. So this really gives the level of control back to IT, control of the applications. So we're talking there, you've got no more patches, fixes, upgrades. They're all done as a single instance management process, done once at the server and then delivered to the multitude of users. So if you think about that for a situation with, let's say we've got 200 users distributed over different locations, might even be different geos. For IT to do upgrades and patches and fixes on their workstations is a huge task. Under a virtualized deployment, it's single instance management and then made available to that raft of users in their different locations and the different apps that they need. So control of the users, access to both the applications and the data, fully controlled at the press of a button. Enterprise mobility is improved, new users can be deployed instantly. So if we look at, let's take the building design suite or something of that nature, we've probably got 35, 40 gig of data to load on a workstation to install for each new user. Clearly, if you're doing a deployment for a project team of 20 and you need building design suite, that's a lot of work for IT to manage. Doing it in a virtualized environment, all that happens is you set up the new user and give them availability of the applications that they need and the data sets that they need to do their work. So from an enterprise point of view, the ability to upscale and downscale, redeploy resources far quicker with much more control, all centrally controlled by IT. So individuals or groups can be upscaled, and this allows IT to respond to the changing needs and changing collaborators that we're now seeing, because the collaborators will change massively during any project life cycle. The other key thing we need to talk about with virtualization, the other characteristic of virtualization is mobility, not just for the enterprise as we just discussed, but for the users. So users will have access when they want it, where they want it, on whatever device they want it on. All of the processing is centralized, so the endpoint device, again, no consequence, device and operating system independent. So we can support remote users, branch users, home users, site users, third-party collaborators coming in from anywhere. And indeed, this fits into enterprise bring your own device policies. But it's really giving that mobility. But the key thing about this is, with that mobility, we're also keeping the security. And the way we do that, quite simple. The data never leaves the central servers or the data center. All users access into that central area to view or work on the data there. No files go outside there. So we've got no more files moving across the network, so we're taking the pressure off the network. We're not transferring any data to third-party assets or hardware. It all remains secure and completely under the control of the IT department. So when we talk about this, how virtualization meets the demands, the data, as I said, stays central, stays virtualized, data never leaves the data center and the server. We're not putting files across the network, we're reducing the network traffic, but most of all it's about retaining the security, which is the key thing for the data. In terms of access to applications, access to for the users, well, we can manage all of the upgrades, patches, single instance management, version control, everything's controlled centrally by IT. Users controlled centrally for all access, what apps they have access to, when they have access to it. This suits obviously branch, home, site, hot desking, IT can switch on and off users just like that. So if we have a user with a laptop that has access to data and his laptop is lost, IT just cancels access for that laptop. There's no compromise of IP or lost data. It allows the business the ability to upscale and downscale to meet the needs of different user groups during the project lifecycle. But the key thing, of course, is the security. So the data is never leaving the data center. All that goes backwards and forwards across the networks, mouse movements, pixel changes, keystrokes. IT has full control. Data never leaves the security of the central area. And ultimately, by doing this, we're saving huge amounts of money. We've seen what we need, how we need to move forward to how IT deals with these demands and what strains that puts on IT, whether it's increasing processors, whether it's upgrading networks, all of these different areas where these are huge savings in direct cost, but equally the key thing is in terms of IT management and the savings we're making at IT management. So we've seen how virtualization can provide the platform for collaboration to meet the benefits and the requirements of BIM. We've seen how we're putting increased demands on IT and how IT has to meet those demands in a workstation deployment, which only leads to increased costs directly through data management, security networks, indirectly through, of course, the increased IT management. But the thing that we can't do in a distributed workstation environment is, of course, provide the level of security that's needed. And in real terms, collaboration actually undermines the business by failing to provide that security and IP protection that it needs. So virtualization, cloud computing, actually increases the return on investment, drives down the total cost of ownership. All the time it's doing that. It's improving accessibility, increasing enterprise mobility, significantly reducing hardware and network costs, massively reducing IT management costs, but most importantly, it's improving the security situation. So virtualization or cloud solutions provide the perfect platform to deploy secure collaboration. By their very nature, they're ideal to effectively provide the processing power needed for the large files and models we now have to deal with BIM files. They benefit from built-in security of centralized data while providing securely controlled access for any user on any device from anywhere. So they perfectly meet the needs of collaboration while removing the problem of security compromise from the distributed data traditionally associated in workstation deployment. So at the same time, they're providing significant financial savings, total cost of ownership, improved return on investment, and of course the immeasurable savings in IT management. So in essence, I hope today we've shown you how private clouds can be used to meet the demands of collaboration, but most importantly, how they can do that and provide the level of security that IT and the business demand and the business need going forward. Now, I believe I've just reached my point of questions on today's webinar, and I'm looking at the clock, and I believe I've exactly hit the time of 30 minutes, as was my plan. So what I'm going to do is thank everybody for your time this morning, this afternoon, for those of you in APAC and the US. As I say, we will be recording this webinar. It will be posted on our YouTube channel. You can access this through YouTube, through our website, as usual. Thank you for those of you who have posted questions today. I'm not going to answer those now because we do try and keep these to 30 minutes. What we will do is come back to you. We'll take all of these questions offline, and I'll respond to all of those points in there. So thank you very much for listening today. We do these every 2 weeks or so, so we look forward to speaking to you again in the near future. My name is Chris Harvey. If you've got any questions or anything for me, my details are on the screen. By all means, take those and pop me an email. Thank you very much, and have a good day.